That's not a ban. That's not a ban.
You don't describe, you'd have to be 18 to purchase cigarettes.
And there's no doctor that's telling anyone that it's medically necessary to consume alcohol at all.
Yeah, but other procedures are banned, right? Lots of other procedures are banned.
And the fact that this has been so politicized, and the fact that these people have been dehumanized and used as political footballs and political wedges on the right, and they have been throughout this entire election, and the fact that these people are not made to feel like people.
Hello, everybody. Guys, we got a panel with CNN. And before we get to that, I talk a lot about racism in this channel, mainly because I just think it's vile and honestly mind-boggling that we still deal with this issue. But I also think it serves as almost the tree for all other forms of bigotry. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Let's get right into this.
Walk us through this. What is the case for gender-affirming care for minors specifically?
I think it really does revolve around access to health care between a doctor and their patient and the parents of the child. Being able to have access to the type of health care that is available for all types of people, whether they're trans or whether they are cis, which is non-trans. And this court case in specifically is asking the question, is it fair to discriminate against transgender people and limit access to care because they are trans? And that's basically what's at the crux of this court case.
Coleman, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a controversial procedure. We've seen in the past few years, places like Norway and the UK have reevaluated their guidelines on it, which goes to show that the science is not settled on whether this is the best way to approach gender dysphoria in minors. You see, in states, states are allowed to regulate lots of things. You're not allowed to get a tattoo. You're not allowed to get certain procedures. You're not allowed, states have banned all kinds of medical procedures for minors. And so I think it's an issue that is probably best left with the states at this point in history until the science becomes much more settled on what actually is the very best gold standard scientific protocol for kids with gender dysphoria.
What do you mean?
Guys, this science thing, he says science there multiple times. Like the right wing gives any F about science. When it goes against what they want, they don't care about science. Climate change, they don't care about it. The whole vaccines denialism against science. They're against science all the time. These people are not going to, even if it's proven scientifically, these idiots on the right wing are still going to fight against it because it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with bigotry, and we're going to get into that in a second, but let's let them finish.
I think we have that gold standard. This is medical best practice as determined by a number of national and global health organizations that says this type of healthcare is life-saving and medically necessary. So we have the data and the receipts, as it were, to show that this actually is the care that is necessary for young people.
I don't think that's true. I mean, again, if you look at countries like Norway, Sweden, Finland, UK, France, they've changed their guidelines just in the past 2 years because they've looked at that old evidence again and said that actually when you take out the bad studies and just look at the best studies, we're really not sure if this is on net better than psychotherapy for teens.
But do you know what the result of that was?
Go ahead.
What's the result of them reevaluating? It's not a ban on any healthcare.
Yeah, it's a tightening of the standards.
Yeah,
and it still is available.
Well, let me just add a little bit of context here because I think what you're discussing in the UK, it's not a ban, which is different from what we're talking about here.
We're talking about a ban. We're talking about a ban.
But they did, as Coleman said, they made it much more difficult for most minors to get, particularly hormone therapy and other kinds of medical sort of procedures that are related to this. So I think that's kind of the question is, I mean, is there a case to be made to just wait for minors, just for this population of people under the age of 18, to wait until they are older, they're fully developed, they have agency over their own lives, and can make those decisions, and also for the science to develop much more clarity on the consequences?
I think that's a great question. And can we think of any other circumstance in which medically necessary care is denied to someone until they turn 18?
Based on their sex.
I think the dispute
is over whether it's the medical best choice. That's precisely the question. Yeah. My point in bringing up Western Europe is not to draw a direct link to the ban. It's to say, if some of the most advanced societies in the world have changed their scientific understanding just in the past 2 years, how confident can we be? How confident can you be that your view is perfectly settled science right now? It could be 5 years from now, actually the picture changes, and states should have the flexibility to react to that. And not every state's gonna agree, but I think it should be left with the states at this point.
But when you're talking about the states, are you talking about government and lawmakers? Because I think that lawmakers should.
This is so dangerous to do. This is their same view of abortion. Leave it to the states. Do you know how some of these states are ran? Some of these states are trying to make it illegal. I think some of them even did, for you to leave the state and get an abortion. Meaning you could be arrested if you got an abortion, left the state and got an abortion somewhere else. And it's because it has nothing to do with the science. It has nothing to do with they care about people's lives. Guys, this is what I want to get to. It has to do with fear and bigotry. I think there's two things to it. And the reason I speak about racism is mainly because I think it's just the longest and just most disgusting injustice. But it is, to me, almost like the tree. And all other forms of bigotry are the branches of it. From being fearful of immigrants, from being fearful of people of different religions, like Muslims, being fearful of people's sex, their gender, the people they want, their spouses, right? Like it makes it so it opens the door, because I believe if you can get a population to have fear of another population just based off their skin color, if you can indoctrinate people to that extent, it's just so much easier to have any other form of bigotry. Believe that women don't deserve to work in the workplace or have the same rights as you. Believe that people of immigrants that come to this country that may speak a different language or a different skin color than you are a danger to you somehow. No matter what the facts are, because these people don't care about the facts. It's been said 1,000 times about immigrants that they commit less crimes. They don't care about the facts. They don't care about the science. It's about the fear. Right? And the fear, you can, like I said, you can have a control on all these other forms of bigotry. If you can get people just to hate on skin color. You know how easy it is to get people to hate because someone decides to become a trans man or a trans woman? Or if someone's gay or not gay, like it just opens the door for it. And the Republican Party, MAGA, they get people to vote based off fear. It all works to their advantage. This is why. And I think it's just a bad faith argument. These people on the right, I wish they would say it. These people on the right don't give a shit about science and the study and making sure people are safe. They don't care about that. Because if they cared about that, they would be okay with vaccines that saved God knows how many lives.
Not be the arbiters of people's health care. That should be between the patient and the doctor and their parents, in this case, if they're minors. Those are the people who should be making the medical decisions for their family, not a governor.
But do you know what I think is ironic, actually, if you're a conservative? Conservatives constantly talk about the fact that they want parents making decisions for their children. That's why they sometimes don't want books in certain schools, because they want the parents to be able to tell their kids what they can and can't read. They sometimes want parents to be able to say whether their kids can take sex ed classes or not. The state shouldn't be able to do that. The parents should be able to do that. And here, conservatives are the ones saying, no, the state knows better than the parents. And you tell me, who knows your child better than the parent? And if a parent says that their 16-year-old child, for example, is at the point where they desperately need this, psychologically and physically, then who is the state? From a conservative state, I'm asking you as a conservative to come in, or you as a conservative, to come in and say, no, actually, on this one issue, we, the state, know better than the parents.
Abel?
You know,
They're just fascistic, right? This is why they're called fascistic, authoritarian. It's because of behaviors like this. And I believe that the reason, again, I said this before, the reason they attack academia is so that they can keep their population at a certain knowledge level with a certain level of critical thinking, and won't question them too much when they say these types of people are dangerous because of this, and that, or whatever.
it's a tough issue, and I listened to every word you said, Abby, on the 18-year-old. And that's kind of where I come from. I come from the standpoint, I was raised in a household where my grandmother said, son, every mind is a different world. So we're all different. I get that. But the question is, when does that young child, when their brain is developing, when they're growing as a baby to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, when do we make the decision that it's their choice? And in my mind and in my heart, you got to be 18 years old, because even if you ask mom and dad, now you're putting them in a position where down the road there's regret.
But can I ask you, what about the bans? I mean, I think that there is almost, I don't want to lionize what Europe did, but just to contrast it, a ban with guidelines that state clearly when this is appropriate. Why are states going straight to bans as opposed to doing something more thoughtful?
Abby, I'm a states guy, and I feel that way, and I think it should be up to the states. I think the states will make the decision, let the voters make that decision, and we're going to see what the Supreme Court says.
Can I push back a little bit on that, though? Because usually when you have to wait till 18 to do something, we don't describe it as a ban, right? Because a ban would imply
Well,
you
I
can't.
think that's true, but in this case, there are penalties for people who provide.
Well, there are penalties for someone who
this
sells
care,
alcohol
so,
to a minor, too. I'm
Well,
not saying it's
there is a
comparable,
ban on-
but I'm saying
I would describe that as
that's
a
not a
ban.
ban. That's not a ban.
You don't describe, you'd have to be 18 to purchase cigarettes.
And
You
there's
don't
no
describe
doctor
that as-
He just makes these stupid, bad faith arguments. He's just playing a semantics game. Well, it's not a ban. It's a restriction or something. It's like, who cares? The outcome is the same. Like, why are we getting hung up on whether it's a restriction or a ban? He's like, these people.
Telling anyone
have
that
to wait
it's
till
medically
you're 18.
necessary to consume alcohol at all.
Yeah, but other procedures are banned, right? Lots of other procedures are banned.
What we're talking about, though, when we talk about healthcare for trans youth, we're not necessarily talking about surgeries. The only medical intervention recommended for trans kids is social support. There's no medical intervention recommended.
Which is also gender affirming care.
But we're talking about puberty blockers
Yes,
and hormone therapy.
so
Yeah.
for children, it's only social support. There are very clear-cut recommendations when adolescents hit certain developmental marks where there are another set of recommendations. And we're not talking about blockers, we're talking about delayers. And so when we talk about hormone therapy, puberty delayers, all of this is giving young adults a little bit more time to make decisions. It's blocking, it's slowing down temporarily the onset of natural puberty, which makes it a lot more comfortable to be in your body if you're trans. It gives you a lot more space if you want to have.
Can I ask a question
Please.
about that? I mean, just
Please.
to be educated. You said it delays it. I'm wondering how sure you are of that, because I think that's the critique, is that do we know that if you do it and it actually delays it if you're in puberty, if you're not an adult?
Shane Diamond, I'm not sure about that. However, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health is sure about that. This is a delay. This is fully reversible.
One thing I want to ask you both.
And guys, it just reminded me of something. This is why they constantly attack science, the medical field, is so that they can, again, indoctrinate these people not to trust any of these professionals. And if you don't trust any of these professionals, when they tell you, hey, you know, there's nothing wrong with these people, right? They're just, because of this, there's a spectrum to be whatever, or this or that. And once you get knowledgeable about these things, it's hard to be, I think it's hard to be a real bigot when you're knowledgeable and you have critical thinking. You're not just coming from a place of just all out hate or whatever. And I think you have to keep these people dumb. I think people like Coleman Hughes, he's not a dumb guy. He just is willing, right? Like, that's why I call him a MAGA cultist. He may not act just like MAGA, but he's adjacent to them. He says the same exact arguments. Why are we even talking about trans people? Let's talk about that for a second. It affects such a small amount of the population. Why do they do this? It's a fear game. Trump even said during the campaign, you bring your kid to a school, he's a boy, and then they come out a girl. This is what they're doing in your schools, like making crap up. Why do you think, again, it's a fear tactic, right? If you get people to be scared, you could probably get them to vote for you. And then the other layer to that, I believe, is white nationalism. Why I say racism is the funnel to all forms of bigotry. If you can get someone to hate someone just because of skin color, you can get them to hate someone for anything.
both Peppermint and Shane. The conversation that we are having here is actually not a conversation that happens very often. And one of the things about this issue is that there is fear on both sides. There's a reason you both are here today, because there's fear of people who are trans coming in settings where they have to defend themselves and their identities and who they are, and fear of people who may not know much about this issue even talking about it, but they have feelings about it. So how do we address that? Because it feels to me like this is an animating issue in the country, and everyone is walking on eggshells talking about it.
It is, and I do think it's important to try to have a respectful discourse and understand that there are so many strong feelings. And I think part of the reason why there's so many strong feelings is we're talking, specifically when we're talking about trans issues, this is something that relates to gender and sexuality, something that all human beings have an inherent connection to, and also feel like they are the authority on. But every person is different in their own gender, in their own sexuality, in their own expression. And I want to go back to the gender affirming care aspect. You know, we're talking about, even for older teenagers, people 17, 18, we're talking about services, medical care that cis people get all the time. Puberty blockers are used outside of people who are transgender. Hormones, HRT, are used for people who are of all ages to avoid precocious puberties, things like that. And we're not seeing bans or people saying, oh, well, no one in the state can get HRT if you're a female and you're trying to avoid a precocious, puberty. This is only with regards to people who are transgender, and it's being implemented that way, and that's what is being argued at the state level in Tennessee.
I'm curious.
It's because they're not coming from a place of good to help society in any way. It comes, right, like they did this with gay people back in the day, and now that gay and lesbian has just become a bit more accepted, they moved away from that. Trans people have always been here. We've all seen them. This has never been an issue. The bathrooms they use and stuff. When has this ever been an issue? It's just a new tactic to scare the crap out of their base and get them to vote, or at minimum, get them to follow them with this cult-like behavior and listen to all the other crap that they want you to follow, like white nationalism.
Coleman, about that.
The reason none of those other uses are controversial is because those are long-standing, highly evidence-backed, non-politicized issues that have been conditions that have been treated that way going back a very long time. The protocol for gender-affirming care for children, the evidence is it's very weak. That's why it just changed 2 years ago in half the Western European countries, and it's a politicized issue, which means the advocates of the science are not always representing the science accurately.
I think it has been politicized. I don't think being transgender or seeking medical care is political. I think it has been politicized largely by the right to create this type of conversation, to create these wedges. And we have now pigeonholed transgender people as the crux of what so much is hung upon in political discourse. But trans people make up such a small percentage of the population, and trans youth make up an even smaller percentage, that we are having these huge national televised conversations about a group of people that actually is a very small percentage of the population.
But is the alternative to not have the conversation? Because I mean, I think one of the reasons the conversation has to happen is because the numbers are growing of young people who identify as trans.
I wouldn't say that there's necessarily more young people who are trans. I think we have more language to describe who we are and how we feel. I think we are seeing transgender faces like Peppermint and myself on TV, in film, in movies, and young people and older people are finally seeing themselves represented and are they have the language now to identify how they feel, how they felt. So I don't think we are seeing more transgender people. I don't think this is like an influx of trans people.
Can I also add just one thing to that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question was about, shouldn't we, I mean, I'm wondering, do you think it's better to talk about it or to not? Because
I think it's
I'm
better to
wondering
learn about it, because we are hearing a lot of conversation that has been highly politicized, and most of the conversations, with maybe the exception of this one and a few this week, have not involved transgender people in any way, shape, or form, but major decisions that impact our bodies, our lives, our families, our health are being made without us being considered at all.
Would you agree?
My view, and this might be controversial, I don't think we should be talking about it. The reason it's only a conversation is because the right wing is able to make it a conversation. And because they're able to make it a conversation, they're able to then say, hey, if you elect me, I'll push this bill that bans them from using bathrooms and bans them from this and that. This is why they do it. I don't think they're coming from a good place. So no, I don't think we should talk about it. If it's coming from a good place and it was a real good faith argument, then sure. But these people, this is not where they're coming from. And they've shown it with other issues along the same lines.
It would be even better to have a conversation with trans people at the table and people who have detransitioned and have a conversation with all the stakeholders.
Absolutely, but I think...
Well, that very rarely happens.
100%. I mean, you can produce that. What we're talking about here is people... in this situation with regards to the Supreme Court case, we're talking about people being able to have bodily autonomy, the right to make decisions about their own body and their own health in conference with their medical providers and their families. And that is where the decisions and the impact of that decision will play out. And so those are the people who have the highest stakes.
Yeah, just one thing I want to add. I mean, we're talking about children and young adults who are going through an incredibly difficult time in their lives. And the fact that this has been so politicized and the fact that these people have been dehumanized and used as political footballs and political wedges on the right, and they have been throughout this entire election. And the fact that these people are not made to feel like people, but are made to feel like political props is disgraceful. And, that's why it's been politicized. It's been politicized because people forget that they're talking about human beings and only start thinking about them as props. And this is exactly what it felt like for people 20, 30 years ago who were gay. That's exactly the same movement that happened back then. It's become more acceptable now, and now it's happening to the trans community. And I think as somebody who is not trans and somebody who's a straight woman, I've seen this trajectory, and I think it's disgraceful. And I just want to say, for the record, I'm glad we're having this discussion. And I'm glad that for once, that this is not being used as a political football to try to go after vulnerable people who are going through an incredibly difficult time in their lives.
All right, we do have to.
All right, guys, we're going to leave it there. And yes, as a straight man, I feel exactly the same way. These things never affected my life. It seems to only harm the people they're going after. I've never had a trans person or a gay person, lesbian person ever harm my life in any way. But I've seen their lives get harmed. This is just insane. And guys, and this whole good faith argument, like they don't care about these things. It's the same, right? Like at one point, Irish people and Italian people were looked at as foreigners and dirty and dangerous and all this stuff before they were accepted in, because it's just a tactic of fear. And I think at the source of it, it's white nationalism, right? They don't like anything different from them. And a way to get people to agree with you is to scare the crap out of them and lie about these different groups of people. But guys, let me know. That's why I can't tell with Coleman Hughes if is he a bigot, or just a cultist, just a grifter. I think he's a grifter, but it's just so hard to tell with some of these people. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm gonna leave it there, guys. Thank you for watching. If you got all the way to the end, and I'll catch you in the next one.